Every human being alive today can trace their ancestry back to dark-skinned ancestors who lived in Africa. This is one of the most well-established facts in human evolutionary biology, and yet it raises a fascinating question. If we all started with dark skin, why do so many people today have light skin? The answer takes us on a journey through genetics, migration, climate, and the surprising power of natural selection to reshape our bodies in relatively short spans of time. Let's start at the beginning. Around 2 million years ago, our early ancestors likely had pale skin covered in dark hair, much like our closest living relatives, chimpanzees, but something changed. As early humans evolved to walk upright and became more active hunters on the open savannas of Africa, they needed a way to cool their bodies efficiently. The solution was to lose most of their body hair and dramatically increase the number of sweat glands on their skin. This allowed for highly efficient evaporative cooling, letting early humans run and hunt for long periods without overheating. But this created a new problem. Losing body hair meant exposing bare skin directly to the intense equatorial sun. Ultraviolet radiation is dangerous. It damages DNA, it can cause skin cancer, and critically, it destroys folate, a B vitamin that's absolutely essential for cell division, for healthy fetal development, and for sperm production. Without adequate folate, reproduction becomes difficult and birth defects become more common. So there was enormous evolutionary pressure to protect the skin from UV damage. The answer was melanin. Melanin is a pigment produced by specialized cells called melanocytes, and it acts like a natural sunscreen. It absorbs and scatters ultraviolet radiation before it can penetrate deep into the skin and cause damage. Early humans living near the equator, under the most intense sun exposure on Earth, evolved high concentrations of eumelanin, the type of melanin that produces dark brown and black skin tones. This wasn't a cosmetic feature. It was a life-or-death adaptation that protected fertility, protected against skin cancer, and preserved the genetic integrity of the population. For hundreds of thousands of years, this is how things stayed. Dark skin was the default and the optimal adaptation for humans living in tropical and equatorial regions. But then, starting somewhere between 100,000 and 70,000 years ago, groups of humans began migrating out of Africa. They moved north into the Middle East, into Europe, into Central Asia, and eventually across the world into places with far less intense sunlight, shorter days in winter, and much weaker ultraviolet radiation. This migration created an entirely new evolutionary pressure, and it worked in the opposite direction. While strong sunlight destroys folate, sunlight is also essential for something else the body needs: vitamin D. When ultraviolet B rays hit the skin, they trigger a chemical reaction that converts a cholesterol compound into vitamin D3, which is vital for calcium absorption, bone health, immune function, and overall development. In regions with abundant sunlight, dark skin doesn't cause vitamin D problems because there's still more than enough UV penetrating even heavily pigmented skin to produce what the body needs. But in northern latitudes where sunlight is weaker and the sun sits lower in the sky for much of the year, that calculation flips. Dark skin in a low sunlight environment blocks too much of the already limited UV radiation, making it difficult to produce sufficient vitamin D. Chronic vitamin D deficiency leads to serious problems: weakened bones, a condition called rickets in children, muscle weakness, immune dysfunction, and reduced fertility. So in these northern regions, natural selection began favoring individuals with less melanin, lighter skin that could let in more of the scarce ultraviolet radiation and produce adequate vitamin D even during long, dim winters. This is often called the vitamin D hypothesis, and it remains the leading explanation for why lighter skin evolved as humans spread into higher latitudes. Essentially, populations were caught between two competing pressures. Too much melanin in a low sun environment risked vitamin D deficiency. Too little melanin in a high sun environment risked folate destruction and skin damage. Over many generations, each population's skin tone gradually shifted toward whatever balance worked best for the amount of sunlight in their specific environment. This is why we see a general gradient across the globe, historically, where skin tone correlates fairly closely with latitude and the intensity of local sunlight. Now here's where it gets genuinely surprising and where modern genetic research has overturned a lot of old assumptions. For a long time, scientists assumed that light skin evolved gradually as modern humans first pushed into Europe and Asia tens of thousands of years ago. But ancient DNA studies conducted over the past decade or so have revealed something unexpected. Many of the earliest modern humans in Europe, including hunter-gatherers who lived there 8 to 10,000 years ago, still had dark skin. The genetic mutations responsible for the lightest skin tones common in Europe today, particularly variants in genes like SLC24A5 and SLC45A2, appear to have spread much more recently than previously thought, potentially within just the last several thousand years, possibly connected to the spread of agriculture. This matters because it points to another piece of the puzzle: diet. Hunter-gatherer diets were often rich in vitamin D from sources like fish, organ meat, and animal fat. But when humans transitioned to agriculture, relying more heavily on grain-based diets, they lost a lot of that dietary vitamin D. This may have intensified the pressure to get vitamin D from sunlight instead, accelerating the selection for lighter skin in farming populations. So light skin wasn't simply a slow drift that happened as soon as people left Africa. It seems to have evolved through multiple waves, in different populations at different times, and for a mix of related reasons. It's also worth noting that light skin didn't evolve just once. Populations in East Asia developed lighter skin tones through partially different genetic mutations than populations in Europe. This is a beautiful example of what biologists call convergent evolution, where similar environmental pressures produce similar physical outcomes, but through different underlying genetic pathways. It shows that the pressure to balance UV protection against vitamin D production was strong and consistent enough that it independently reshaped human populations in multiple parts of the world. There are other proposed factors too. Some researchers have explored the idea of sexual selection playing a role. The idea that certain skin tones may have become associated with health or attractiveness within specific cultures, reinforcing genetic trends already being driven by climate. This remains more speculative and is generally considered a secondary factor rather than the primary driver, with UV radiation and vitamin D synthesis remaining the dominant, well-supported explanations. What's remarkable when you step back and look at the full picture is how elegant and responsive human evolution has been to environment. Skin color is not a marker of fundamental difference between groups of people. It's a surface-level adaptation, quite literally, to the amount of ultraviolet light a population's ancestors were exposed to over thousands of generations. It reflects a trade-off the body constantly has to manage between protecting folate and DNA from UV damage on one hand, and producing enough vitamin D for healthy bones and immune function on the other. So the shift from dark to light skin among certain human populations wasn't random, and it wasn't about one group being more evolved than another. It was a finely tuned biological response to geography, sunlight, latitude, and eventually diet, as humans spread from the equator toward the poles. Their skin gradually recalibrated to match the light available to them, a powerful reminder that even something as visible and seemingly simple as skin color carries within it a deep history of migration, survival, and adaptation written across tens of thousands of years of human evolution.